My name is Helena Monroe. I'm 38 years old. And this is the story of how my parents gave my $10 million legacy to my brother, and how I made them regret it for the rest of their lives. It started on a Sunday morning I'll never forget. I was in my downtown Denver condo, wearing a charcoal robe, standing barefoot in my kitchen, sipping a lukewarm cup of green tea. The skyline stretched beyond my 23rd floor windows, all glass and light and promise. But inside, my phone buzzed with a message that made my blood run cold. It was from my mother. Just 6 words. Family meeting. Sunday. It's important. No greeting. No love. Just a command, like I was still the obedient little girl expected to drop everything for the family drama factory. I hadn't heard from my parents in over 3 months, not since my grandmother Evelyn's funeral. And even then, they'd barely looked at me. Back then, I hadn't been surprised. I had known, deep in my bones, that once they found out what Grandma Evelyn left behind, they'd come for it. Like they always did. Like Jacob always did. Jacob. My younger brother. My parents' golden boy. Their only son, as they liked to emphasize, even in front of me. He was 3 years younger, but somehow always 10 steps ahead in their affection. When he dropped out of college? They blamed the professors. When he lost money in crypto? They blamed the market. When he maxed out 3 credit cards gambling in Vegas? They said he was finding himself. Meanwhile, I put myself through school, graduated summa cum laude, built a financial firm from scratch, and never asked them for a cent. Not once. I was the invisible success story. The one who didn't need help. The strong one. The boring one. The one they never celebrated. And that's exactly why Grandma Evelyn chose me. She wasn't a woman of many words, but when she did speak, her words were razor sharp. I still remember what she said to me when I was 15 and had just finished presenting her with a handwritten budget report I'd made for her company's outreach program. Helena, you see numbers the way other people see colors. You have vision. Your brother, well, he has charm. But charm doesn't pay bills. I'm counting on you to protect what I've built. At the time, I had no idea what she meant. But now I did. Evelyn Monroe had left me everything, her house in Telluride, her portfolio of clean energy investments, her jewelry, her personal safe, and most importantly, a plan. A legacy. A roadmap. All under my name. And that morning, I knew the time had come. My parents were going to try to take it. I leaned back against the marble counter and exhaled. I hadn't told them the full details of the inheritance. All they knew was that Evelyn had left some assets. But they didn't know how much. And they didn't know that she had legally locked it away, protected it with firewalls, trusts, and clauses meant to keep them, and especially Jacob, out. I'd never seen the point of confrontation. I had built my life by being silent, efficient, unstoppable. But this time? They weren't getting a single cent. And I was done playing the quiet role. The first red flag appeared 3 days before the funeral, when my father, Henry, asked if I'd share the wealth for Jacob's latest business idea. He said it so casually, as if the $3.2 million equity portfolio Grandma left me was a family piggy bank. I told him no. Firmly. Politely. And his face changed, not with disappointment, but with calculation. I didn't trust him. Or my mother. Or Jacob. Which is why I had already started moving pieces behind the scenes. What they didn't know was that I had created a private irrevocable trust under the name HM Legacy Holdings 2 days after the will was read. All property titles, stocks, and heirlooms were transferred quietly and legally. I even hired a security firm to relocate Evelyn's vintage jewelry to a climate-controlled vault. The trust had one beneficiary, me. And one clause, no modifications without my signature. I thought I'd be ready when they finally came for it. I wasn't ready for how ruthless they'd be. Because 3 hours after my mother's vague message, I got an email from an anonymous address. Subject: Monroe Family Restructuring Proposal. I clicked. My heart dropped. Attached was a full PDF titled Draft Proposal, Consolidation of Inherited Assets into Monroe Family Trust. The author? My father. The cosigner? My mother. The purpose? To combine and unify Helena Monroe's inherited holdings with the family's financial foundation for the benefit of future stability and strategic planning. I read that line 10 times. My name. My assets. My grandmother's legacy, all repackaged as if it had been some temporary loan for the greater good. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. They weren't even pretending anymore. This wasn't a conversation. This was a coup. But I had one thing they didn't: proof. I pulled out a folder from my filing cabinet. Inside were notarized copies of Grandma's updated will, trust formation documents, and photos of a handwritten letter she had left me. They won't understand. But that's not your burden. Just promise me one thing: don't give in. You don't owe them anything. Protect what's good. Even if it means standing alone. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed my legal protections, emailed my attorney Avery Klein to update her, and made sure all digital records were secured. Then I wrote a reply to my mother's message. I'll be there Sunday. But I won't be handing over anything. I didn't hear back. But I knew they were already planning how to break me. And I was ready to show them that the Helena they raised to be silent no longer existed. I arrived at my parents' house on Sunday at exactly 3 p.m., wearing a fitted black blazer, slacks, and low heels, the kind of outfit that made it impossible for them to pretend I was still their little girl. My car, a discreet but powerful electric sedan, purred into the driveway. Jacob's Dodge Charger was already parked out front like a warning sign, loud and irresponsible, just like him. The house looked the same: white siding, polished lawn, an American flag gently waving in the breeze, like everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. The front door opened before I even rang the bell. My mother, Denise Monroe, appeared wearing a cashmere sweater and pearls like this was a family reunion and not a financial ambush. Her face cracked into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're here, she said, stepping aside. Let's just get to the point, I replied, stepping past her. The living room was staged, just like I'd expected. Legal pads on the table, a tray of lemon cookies, and 3 water bottles, all unopened. My father was already seated in his favorite chair, the one with the carved arms and worn leather seat, pretending to read over a typed document. Jacob sat with one leg over the other, dressed like someone trying to look casual for court, gray hoodie, fresh sneakers, clean shave. His expression was unreadable, though his eyes flicked nervously toward the documents in front of him. I didn't sit. Instead, I placed a sealed envelope on the center of the glass coffee table. It was thick. It had weight. And it was a declaration of war. This, I said, is a certified legal record of the irrevocable trust one created 2 weeks ago. Every asset Grandma left to me has been transferred into it. Permanently. It cannot be altered, contested, or accessed by anyone but me. The room went still. My father's fingers twitched. My mother's eyes narrowed. I beg your pardon, my father said, his voice low but sharp. You heard me, I replied calmly. The Telluride property? It's now under the Helena Monroe Legacy Trust. The investment accounts? Reassigned. The heirlooms? In secure storage. And unless you plan to illegally access a registered trust protected by federal laws, you can't touch any of it. Jacob let out a low breath like he'd been slapped. Helena, come on, he muttered. We're family. No, I said. We're people who share blood. But you made it clear a long time ago that only one of us gets treated like family. And it's not me. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. Your grandmother intended for this family to stay together. You are twisting her wishes to punish us. She intended for what she built to be preserved, not torn apart and absorbed into another one of Jacob's failed rescue missions. You're not protecting her memory, you're pillaging it. I opened my bag and pulled out another document. A printed PDF with highlighted sections. Their Monroe family restructuring draft. I've seen what you planned. Consolidating her estate into a new trust, naming Jacob as a flexible beneficiary. You didn't even include me. Not even in the language. That was just a draft, my father barked. With specific numbers, signatures, and a list of assets that weren't even yours to discuss. Don't insult me. Jacob looked at the floor. My mother's face turned pale. She left you too much power, she whispered. No. She left me responsibility. You just can't stand the fact that you can't manipulate me with it. My father's tone dropped to something darker. Think carefully, Helena. You want to turn this into a legal war? I leaned forward. No. But if you make me, I'll bury you in paperwork so deep you'll be praying for a ceasefire. Jacob finally broke. So what, you're just going to watch your own brother crash and burn? You know I'm in trouble, Helena. I met his gaze without flinching. Yes. And for once in your life, you'll face the consequences without dragging the rest of us with you. He stood up, knocking over his water bottle. His voice rose. I'm not the villain here. You think I wanted this? You think I liked being the screw-up? Mom and Dad gave me everything because they didn't know what else to do. I never asked for the house, or the loans, or for them to lie for me. And yet you took it all, I said coldly. Every time. Without guilt. Without shame. Jacob's chest heaved. My mother reached for his arm, but he pulled away. What do you want, Helena? She asked, her voice desperate. You want us to say you're right? You want us to apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. We're sorry. But that money, it's not just numbers. It's a lifeline. We're drowning here. I felt a flicker of emotion. Not compassion. But clarity. I'm not here for revenge, I said softly. I'm here to draw a line. I took one final envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. It's a financial proposal. One that doesn't involve Grandma's trust. If Jacob agrees to enter a 90-day inpatient program, I'll personally pay for it. Separately. With my money. Not hers. Jacob blinked in disbelief. You're offering to help me? I'm offering you a choice, I said. But not a bailout. Not a shortcut. You complete the program, and I'll help you negotiate the legal debts. That's it. What if I fail? He whispered. Then you'll learn to live without a safety net. Just like I did. The room was silent. My father looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. My mother stared at the floor. Jacob sat down slowly, rubbing his temples like he had the world's worst headache. I turned to leave. You have until next Friday to give me your answer, I said. After that, my offer's off the table. And I'll make sure you all understand what it's like to ask for something, and get absolutely nothing. Then I walked out of that house, the front door clicking shut behind me like a final sentence. For the first time in my life, I had no guilt. No second guessing. Because for once, I had protected myself. I didn't hear anything for 5 days. No texts. No calls. Not even a forwarded email full of veiled guilt trips. And honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't waiting with bated breath. I had my own life to run, a company with 5 analysts under me, a pending acquisition proposal in San Francisco, and quarterly presentations to prep for. But even as I buried myself in spreadsheets and investor decks, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. And I was right. On Friday morning, just after 7 a.m., a heavy cream envelope was slipped under my front door. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a letter, typed, formal, and signed by a lawyer I didn't recognize. Dear Ms. Monroe. We are contacting you on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Monroe and Mr. Jacob Monroe regarding the current ownership and allocation of inherited family assets following the passing of Evelyn Monroe. Our clients wish to resolve the division of these assets amicably. To that end, we request a formal meeting to discuss an equitable redistribution of holdings. I stopped reading. Equitable? That was their new word now. Not earned. Not protected. Just redistributed. Like it was a pie, and they deserved a slice for simply sitting at the table. I almost laughed. I took a picture of the letter and forwarded it to Avery Klein with one line. They blinked. Less than 10 minutes later, Avery replied. Come in at 3. We'll respond. Her office, unlike Luther's classic wood-paneled style, was a fortress of steel, glass, and silent power. She sat behind a matte black desk, scrolling through her tablet, eyes sharp behind frameless glasses. They're testing you, she said without looking up. Fishing for weakness. This isn't a legal claim, it's emotional theater wrapped in stationery. They've found a new lawyer, I said. He's bold, I'll give him that. Avery smirked. We'll be bolder. I'll draft a response that not only shuts this down, but reminds them that their attempt to repurpose your grandmother's legacy for personal debt relief violates several clauses in both probate and fiduciary law. I leaned forward. Let them know I'm done playing diplomat. But I'm willing to fund Jacob's recovery. I meant what I said. That's the only bridge I'll build. Understood. Avery's fingers flew across her tablet. And what about the unauthorized asset access? The restructuring file your father drafted? I want it logged. If they push this further, we go public. Press, regulators, whatever it takes. She looked up and gave a slow nod. Good. You're learning. That night, I went home and stood at my apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows, Denver twinkling beneath me like a field of stars. I wasn't the same woman who used to cry in silence whenever my parents favored Jacob. I wasn't the shadow in family photos, the reliable afterthought. I was Helena Monroe. I was a storm they never saw coming. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new message. Jacob. I'm in. I'll go to the program. Just, please tell me it's not too late. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Check-in is Monday, 9 a.m. Cedar Path Recovery Center. I've already paid the deposit. His reply came quickly. Thank you. You didn't have to. But thank you. I didn't answer. Because he was right. I didn't have to. But I did. Because Evelyn raised me better. Not my parents, her. She was the one who taught me that legacy is about more than dollars. It's about doing the right thing even when everyone else chooses the easy one. Still, a storm was brewing. And it wasn't Jacob anymore, it was my parents. 3 days later, I got another email. Not from Jacob. Not from their lawyer. From an unknown address. Subject. Family Stability Fund, revised draft. I clicked. My chest tightened. Inside was a spreadsheet. It outlined a new plan, one my parents had drafted after my trust was finalized. It proposed using Jacob's future recovery as justification to approach financial institutions for additional loans, using my inheritance as leverage. They still didn't get it. I didn't owe them. I didn't owe anyone. I picked up my phone and called Uncle Thomas. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, he said, his voice calm as ever. I need the full picture, I said. You said there was more I didn't know. There was a pause. Then he sighed. Meet me in Greeley. Old 4th Street Diner. Noon. That diner hadn't changed since I was a teenager, red vinyl booths, white tile floors, and the scent of pancakes and coffee that stuck to your clothes. Thomas looked tired but sharp, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his eyes just as steady. He slid a manila folder across the table. This, he said, is what your parents did to keep Jacob afloat for the past 15 years. I warned them. I begged them to stop. But they chose him every time. Inside were copies of loan agreements, tax records, and legal letters. One letter was from a firm representing a man named Miguel Rosas, a name I recognized from news stories involving illegal gambling debts and underground lending in Nevada. They got in deep, Thomas said. And then they dug deeper. They're in over their heads. He nodded. And they think your inheritance is a lifeline. But if you give them even $1, it'll never end. I looked at him. Why are you helping me? Because Evelyn asked me to. She said you were the only one strong enough to say no. I stared out the window, jaw tight. This wasn't about just protecting money. It was about rewriting the rules. The next day, I filed a protective injunction to prevent the Monroe family trust from attempting to claim, consolidate, or solicit any asset related to Evelyn Monroe's estate. When my parents received the court notice, they didn't call. They didn't write. But a courier arrived at my office the next morning, with a single sheet of paper. In my mother's handwriting, just one line. We didn't raise you to be this cold. I stared at the note, then placed it in the shredder without a second thought. They didn't raise me. Evelyn did. And now. I was just getting started. The morning Jacob checked into Cedar Path Recovery Center, the sky over Denver was overcast, casting a pale gray light through the city streets. I waited in my car across the street, engine off, windows slightly fogged. I didn't tell him I'd be there. I just wanted to see if he would actually show up, if he'd walk through those doors himself without someone dragging him. At exactly 9:07 a.m., I saw him. No hoodie. No swagger. Just a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and eyes that looked hollow, but determined. For the first time in years, he looked like someone aware of how broken he was. I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I just watched him go inside. It wasn't victory I felt. It wasn't peace. It was something closer to stillness. Like I had finally laid down a burden I'd been forced to carry since childhood. The burden of holding up a brother who never once held himself accountable. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Evelyn's house in Telluride. It had been 6 weeks since I moved her belongings into protective storage, but the home still felt like her. The scent of lemon balm in the curtains. The soft creak of the cherrywood stairs. Her favorite books still lined the built-in shelves in the reading room, untouched. I sat in her leather armchair by the window and opened the small notebook I'd found in her private safe, handwritten plans to turn the family farmland into a sustainability research center for underrepresented communities. She had even partnered with 2 Native American-led energy nonprofits, quietly assembling permits, land use waivers, and legal grants. It was a blueprint not just for conservation, but for justice. Grandma Evelyn didn't just leave me money. She left me a mission. And I was going to finish what she started. But first, I had to finish what they started. Because that Friday, my parents retaliated. I was mid-presentation in a boardroom in downtown Denver, pitching a high-impact portfolio strategy to a group of investors from Chicago, when I got the email. My assistant had flagged it under the subject line. Urgent, Monroe Family Public Filing. I clicked. They had filed a public notice through a newly created foundation, the Monroe Family Equity Alliance, claiming intellectual rights to the vision and philanthropic mission of Evelyn Monroe's Clean Energy Initiative. They listed the farm property, the nonprofit affiliations, and even the research center blueprints. The arrogance stunned me. They were trying to rewrite Evelyn's legacy and claim it as theirs. And worse, they were trying to spin it as if I was the outsider, the one obstructing a generational dream. I slammed my laptop shut. This wasn't just greed anymore. It was theft in the most insidious form, reputation theft. Moral theft. So I did what Evelyn had taught me, I fought smart. First, I contacted every nonprofit mentioned in their filing. I sent them authenticated copies of Evelyn's original signed letters, stamped board approvals, and statements from her legal counsel confirming me as the sole executor and custodian of her vision. Then I called a press contact I knew at the Denver Tribune, a business journalist who once interviewed me after our third investment fund broke records. I gave him a simple, one-line pitch. Want an exclusive on how a powerful family tried to erase their matriarch's legacy by stealing her vision from her granddaughter? Within 24 hours, the story went live. The battle for Evelyn Monroe's legacy, a family torn by greed. It was brutal. Accurate. Devastating. The article quoted passages from Evelyn's letters. Highlighted Jacob's gambling debt. Cited financial records I had legally disclosed. It painted a clear picture. I wasn't the aggressor, I was the protector. And my parents? They were opportunists in suits. By Monday, public support had swung in my favor. Donors pulled out of my parents' fake foundation. The nonprofits issued formal statements reaffirming their partnership with me and condemning any unauthorized use of their names or causes. I didn't gloat. I just forwarded the article to Avery. Her response was curt and perfect. Checkmate. 2 days later, I received a call. Not from my parents. From Jacob. Helena? His voice sounded stronger. Clearer. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I saw the article. And the house filing. And everything. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. I didn't know they were going to do that, he said. But, it doesn't surprise me anymore. I think I've spent my whole life thinking they loved me more, but now I see, they just needed someone to manage. I exhaled. So what are you going to do about it? He paused. I'm going to get better. For real this time. Not for them. Not even for you. Just, for me. For once, I believed him. Good, I said. Because you're the only one who can. Before hanging up, Jacob added one more thing. Helena, I know I've failed you. More times than I can count. But thank you, for not becoming like them. I didn't answer right away. Because a small part of me knew that once, years ago, I might have. If Evelyn hadn't seen me, hadn't taught me value and discipline and boundaries, I might have grown into a different kind of monster. One that thought love could only be earned by pleasing others until there was nothing left of me. But now? I was more than their scapegoat. More than their plan B. I was Helena Monroe. And I was done making space for anyone who treated me like an afterthought. The backlash was sharper than I expected. Not from strangers or the media, they praised the article. Not from Jacob, he stayed quiet, respectfully, as he should. But from my parents? They began a campaign. It started with a mass email sent to extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles, even Grandma Evelyn's oldest friend from her bridge club. The subject line read, "A call for unity, our family's true story." Inside was a 6-paragraph guilt bomb. They accused me of going rogue, of misrepresenting Grandma Evelyn's wishes, of weaponizing the press to shame the family. They framed themselves as victims, grieving parents who were simply trying to carry on a tradition of legacy and love. It was clever. Ruthlessly so. They knew most of our relatives didn't have the facts, just emotions and old loyalties. And it worked. Within hours, I received 6 passive-aggressive texts and 2 phone calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Helena, surely this is just a misunderstanding? Sweetie, families don't fight in the open like this. I know you're hurting, but dragging your parents through the mud? That's not what Evelyn would have wanted. That last one came from Aunt Margie, a woman who hadn't even visited Grandma in the hospital. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Telluride. Not to hide, but to remember. I walked the hallways of Evelyn's home, touching the smooth railings she once polished by hand, opening the cabinets where she stored loose-leaf tea, reading her notes again in the margins of the old notebooks I'd kept. She never raised her voice. Never called out the family for how they treated me. But in the silence of those pages, she told the truth louder than they ever had. When they try to twist the story, don't fight them in their language. Fight them with light. Clarity is the only weapon they can't manipulate. So I didn't call the cousins. I didn't write rebuttals. I called my foundation director. It was time to go public with Evelyn's sustainability project, officially. We scheduled a press release, filed the project under the new nonprofit arm of the HM Legacy Trust, and invited the media to tour the property. We named the initiative the Monroe Evelyn Clean Futures Project. Fully funded. Fully protected. I even had a bronze plaque commissioned for the entry gate. Let the legacy of care outlast the noise of chaos. EM. 2 days later, a follow-up article appeared in the Denver Tribune. From betrayal to purpose, how Helena Monroe is turning her family's fallout into a future for Colorado. It highlighted the project's mission, the legal protections in place, and Evelyn's vision. Public support surged again. Emails came in from survivors of family estrangement, young women in finance, and even former colleagues of Evelyn's from her earliest construction days. I wasn't just protecting wealth anymore. I was protecting truth. And that truth? It was gaining momentum. But my parents weren't finished. Late Thursday night, I received a call from my attorney, Avery. Helena, she said calmly, they've filed a formal petition to contest the will. They're claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. I felt my jaw clench. They're accusing Evelyn of being manipulated? By me? Yes. The filing's weak, full of speculative language. No hard evidence. But it's a move. They're hoping to stall you, freeze some assets, maybe even trigger a temporary injunction. I stood in my kitchen, staring out at the Denver skyline, heart thumping, not with fear, but fury. I want to counterfile, I said. Avery was quiet for a beat. I figured you would. Not just to defend the will, I continued, but to expose everything. The debt fraud. The restructuring draft. The impersonation attempt to access my accounts. All of it. Are you ready for that level of war? She asked softly. This won't just end relationships. It will incinerate them. I didn't hesitate. Then let it burn. Because some bridges deserve to be ash. Especially when they only ever led me back into pain. The next morning, we filed the counterpetition and included an affidavit signed by Uncle Thomas, along with financial statements, email evidence, and a sworn statement from Jacob himself, confirming that he, not I, had been the source of pressure on Evelyn in the final months of her life. Jacob's statement was brief, raw, and honest. I tried to get more money from my grandmother. She refused. Helena never pressured her. Everything she left was intentional. He didn't send it to me. He sent it directly to Avery. No fanfare. No apology. Just truth. And that meant more to me than any gift he could have given. By the end of the week, my parents' case had begun to unravel. Their attorney filed a motion to withdraw from representation, citing a fundamental breakdown in trust. A formal inquiry was launched into Henry Monroe's previous attempts to access trust accounts using confidential information. And the best part? The judge overseeing the case issued an order declining the petition, calling it an insufficient and unsupported attempt to invalidate the expressed wishes of a competent and highly respected individual. Translation? They lost. I didn't cheer. I didn't throw a party. I just sat alone on Evelyn's porch, watching the wind rustle the tall grasses beyond the farm fence. The sky above was clear and deep blue. The kind of sky that makes you breathe a little deeper. Inside the house, a single light was on, her old reading lamp. I walked in, placed my hand on the back of the leather chair she used to sit in, and whispered, I kept my promise. Because I had. Not just to protect her legacy, but to protect the woman I had become. The one they never saw coming. They didn't call after the judge's ruling. Not even to yell. Not even to curse me out. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was erasure. It was the same kind of silence I'd grown up with. The kind they used to punish, to control. But I was different now. They could go quiet all they wanted. I'd already made peace with what they'd become. It was time to make peace with what I had become. The Helena I used to be, the girl who tiptoed around family dinners, who cleared the table while Jacob cracked jokes and Mom smiled at his every word, that Helena had died. Quietly, with dignity. And in her place stood a woman who had finally realized she owed nothing to anyone who had built a life on taking from her. That weekend, I hosted the first official community planning session at Evelyn's Telluride property. Chairs were arranged in the field facing the farmhouse, the sun warm against the soft autumn chill. Local leaders came, including 2 indigenous advocates from the clean energy nonprofits Evelyn had partnered with, a sustainability professor from CU Boulder, and even a few high school students interested in renewable tech. There were no velvet couches. No glass coffee tables. Just folding chairs, notepads, and vision. I stood under the wooden pergola Evelyn had built herself 30 years ago, surrounded by yellowing aspen trees, and spoke from the heart. My grandmother believed legacy wasn't just about preserving wealth. It was about using what you've been given to build something that outlives you. This project won't carry the Monroe name. It'll carry the Monroe Evelyn promise, that no one gets left behind just because of where they come from. They applauded. Some cried. One of the elders pulled me aside afterward and said, "You're not just honoring her, you're correcting the record." Most people never get that chance. That night, I sat on the back porch with a blanket draped over my shoulders and a cup of cinnamon tea warming my hands. I watched the stars slowly bleed into the sky, crisp and unfiltered in the mountain air. And then, my phone buzzed. It was Jacob. I almost didn't answer. But I did. His voice was quieter now. Less entitled. Less jagged. Helena. I finished my first 30 days. That's good, I said. That's something. There was a long pause. I didn't call to ask for anything. I just wanted to say, thank you. For drawing the line. I didn't say anything. Everyone always treated me like I was fragile. Like I needed saving. You were the first one who told me no and meant it. Still, I stayed silent. Because I wanted to hear it all. I had to hit rock bottom to see it, he continued. But now I do. You were the strong one. You always were. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Because I don't want anything from you anymore, he said. I just want you to know, you were right. Before I could respond, he added one last thing. I've started working at the center's greenhouse. They asked if I wanted to stay on after recovery ends. It's nothing huge, but it's mine. For once, it's something I earned. My chest tightened, not with pity. Not with pride. But with something rarer, the recognition that someone had finally decided to carry their own weight. You keep walking that path, I said quietly. Don't look back. He agreed. And that was the end of it. 3 days later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo album, one I hadn't seen since childhood. On the cover, in faded gold cursive, family. I flipped through the pages. Old pictures from summer BBQs, Christmas mornings. School plays. In almost every one, Jacob was front and center, posing, smiling, performing. But as I turned more pages, I noticed something I hadn't back then. I was in the background of every shot. Setting the table. Carrying plates. Watching silently. Invisible, but there. And suddenly, it hit me. They hadn't just overlooked me. They had built their entire family mythology on my invisibility. On the assumption that I didn't need to be seen, because I was the one who never made noise. But now? I wasn't in the background anymore. I was the headline. And I intended to stay there. That Friday, I received another call, this time from a legal contact in New York. A family finance columnist had picked up the story and wanted to feature the Monroe Evelyn Clean Futures project in a national spotlight piece. I said yes. Not for revenge. Not for attention. But because the story needed to be told. Fully. On my terms. Without spin. Because somewhere out there, another daughter was being erased. And she needed to hear that no amount of family shame, silence, or guilt could stop her from reclaiming what was hers. The morning the New York Times article dropped, I sat in my office before sunrise, the screen casting a quiet glow across my desk. The headline was simple, but it said everything. She inherited her grandmother's fortune, then fought her family to protect its soul. The article was more than just a profile. It was a reckoning. It detailed the truth, not just about Evelyn's legacy or the Monroe family trust scandal, but about me. About what it means to grow up as the dependable daughter, the strong one, the quiet one. The one who was always told, you don't need help, you're the one who gives it. They wrote about how I had taken a $10 million inheritance and turned it into something living, breathing, and accountable. How I'd fought not just to keep it, but to protect it from being exploited, diluted, or turned into a band-aid for generational dysfunction. I didn't cry reading it. I just breathed. It was the kind of breath that fills you up, not from oxygen, but from validation. From knowing, finally, that the world had seen you, not the version your parents kept in the shadows, not the placeholder behind the golden boy, but you. Fully. Clearly. The calls started coming in within hours. Investors. Nonprofit leaders. Women's business groups. Even universities asking if I'd speak on campus about generational wealth, legacy stewardship, and ethical boundary setting. But what caught me off guard was the voicemail. It came in around noon. A woman's voice. Calm. Familiar. Helena, it's Mom. I didn't delete it right away. She continued, I read the article. I see now that, maybe we didn't see you. And I don't know if sorry is enough. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not through lawyers. Just me. There was a pause. You were never invisible. We just depended on you too much. And expected you to always hold. I don't know if you'll ever forgive us. I don't even know if you should. But we're proud of you. Even if it's too late to say that face to face. Click. I stared at the phone. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't. Not entirely. But that wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. You can acknowledge someone's attempt at growth without inviting them back into your home. Into your heart. Forgiveness isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's just permission to move on in peace. I saved the voicemail, not as a souvenir of regret, but as proof that I no longer needed to prove anything. Not to them. Not to anyone. That weekend, I returned to Telluride. This time, I wasn't alone. Local volunteers were preparing for the Clean Futures Center's groundbreaking ceremony. The land had been cleared. The equipment arrived. Permits filed. Construction crews scheduled. Evelyn's dream was no longer ink on paper. It was becoming real, beam by beam, panel by panel. I wore work boots and jeans that day. No blazers. No silk. Just my hair tied back and gloves on, helping mark the property line for the main solar installation. Jacob came. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up, standing on the edge of the field in worn jeans and a plain navy hoodie. His posture was different now, no slouch, no chip on his shoulder. Just a quiet, present stance. "Thought you might want to see this," I said, handing him a pair of gloves. He took them without a word. And we worked side by side. When we broke for lunch, he finally spoke. "You know, I spent a long time thinking being the favorite meant being loved more." I glanced at him. But now I see it just meant I was never taught to stand up on my own. He looked down at the ground, then back at the solar layout blueprints. "You gave me that. Not with money. Not with yelling. With a mirror. And I hated it. But I needed it." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because he wasn't asking for anything. He was offering something, accountability. That was new. That was real. When the day ended, he helped pack up tools and quietly left. No photos. No lingering. Just a nod. And that was enough. Later that evening, I sat in Evelyn's old reading chair, the room bathed in amber light from the brass lamp beside me. On the table was a framed photo, Evelyn and I, standing in front of her old office, both of us in suits, both of us squinting into the sun. I thought about everything it had taken to get here. The betrayal. The isolation. The war no one saw coming. And the decision, over and over, not to become what they accused me of. Cold. Heartless. Ruthless. I wasn't those things. I was prepared. Protective. Powerful. And that didn't come from revenge. It came from remembrance. From remembering who I was before they made me feel invisible. From remembering the woman who told me, "Don't let them steal your light just because they don't know how to shine." That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. "Evelyn, it's done. I didn't just guard the legacy. I grew it. I made sure your name didn't disappear in the mouths of those who only saw your money and not your meaning. And I finally saw myself, not through their eyes. Through yours." Snow began to fall outside. Soft. Gentle. Unstoppable. Like healing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had come home. Helena's story is a reminder that family doesn't always mean fairness, and love doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes the deepest form of love is saying no. Not out of cruelty, but out of courage. To protect what matters. To end the cycle. To begin something better. What would you have done in Helena's place? Have you ever had to walk away from the people you loved to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe in standing up, even when it hurts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us here at Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge.